Welcome to another bone-chilling episode on Enigma of the Unknown. Tonight, we delve into the dark and mysterious tales that unfolded in one of the most unexpected places, Walmart, during the chaos of Black Friday. From unexplained disappearances to ghostly apparitions, these stories will make you think twice about braving the crowds for a deal. Dim the lights, sit back, and prepare yourself as we explore the haunting secrets of Walmart on the darkest shopping day of the year. Story number 1. I never thought that working the overnight shift at a Walmart in Arizona could be anything more than monotonous. Stocking shelves, unloading trucks, and dealing with the occasional disgruntled customer were all part of the job description. But that Black Friday in 2017 changed everything. It's been years, but the events of that night still haunt me, creeping into my thoughts when I least expect them. The day had been a whirlwind of chaos. Black Friday always brought out the masses, swarming the store like locusts, grabbing anything and everything marked down. By the time midnight rolled around, the store was a wreck. Shelves were emptied, products strewn across the aisles, and displays toppled over. The day crew was exhausted, and as part of the overnight team, it was our job to put everything back in order before the madness resumed in the morning. There were 5 of us scheduled that night: me, Carlos, Jenna, Mike, and our supervisor, Linda. We were a tight-knit group, having weathered many a graveyard shift together. We started in the main store, working systematically to restock and reorganize. The atmosphere was strangely subdued, the usual fluorescent glare softened by a few dimmed lights. The hum of the HVAC system and the distant rumble of trucks on the highway were the only sounds. Around 2 a.m., Linda sent Carlos and me to the warehouse to bring out additional stock. The warehouse was massive, a labyrinth of towering shelves and narrow corridors. It always felt colder back there, the concrete floors and high ceilings retaining a chill that the Arizona desert night couldn't produce. "Let's grab the pallets for electronics first," Carlos suggested, checking his clipboard. "Sounds good," I agreed. "The sooner we get those out, the less we'll have to deal with in the morning rush." We maneuvered through the aisles, the beam of our flashlights cutting through the dimness. For some reason, the overhead lights weren't on, but we didn't think much of it. The warehouse had its quirks. As we reached the back corner where the electronics pallets were stored, a faint sound caught my attention. It was a soft, muffled chuckle, echoing from somewhere deeper in the warehouse. "Did you hear that?" I asked, stopping in my tracks. Carlos looked up. "Hear what?" "Thought I heard someone laughing." He listened for a moment, but the sound had ceased. "Probably just Mike messing around," he said with a shrug. "You know how he is." I nodded, but something about the laugh unsettled me. It hadn't sounded like Mike's hearty guffaw. It was different, distant, and hollow. We loaded the pallets onto the forklift and made our way back to the store floor. The incident slipped from my mind as we became engrossed in our tasks. Around 3 a.m., Jenna mentioned that some of the freezer items needed restocking. "I'll handle it," I offered, needing a break from stacking electronics. The freezer section was on the opposite side of the store. As I walked through the aisles, the silence pressed in. The store felt unnaturally still, the kind of quiet that amplifies every creak and rustle. As I approached the freezers, that laugh echoed again, this time louder, clearer. It was unmistakable, a raspy chuckle that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. I spun around, scanning the area. "Hello? Mike, if that's you." "Cut it out." No response. I walked toward the sound, which seemed to be coming from the warehouse entrance nearby. The double doors were slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness peeking through. Taking a deep breath, I pushed them open and stepped inside. "Mike, are you in here?" Silence. I pulled out my flashlight, the beam slicing through the shadows. The warehouse felt different now, oppressive, the air thick and cold. I walked slowly, the hairs on the back of my neck prickling. Then I saw it, a lone shoe lying in the middle of the aisle. It was old, tattered, a men's work boot caked with dust and age. Next to it were deep scratches etched into the concrete floor. as if something heavy had been dragged. A chill ran down my spine. I crouched down to examine the marks. They were jagged, uneven, and disturbingly fresh. "What the hell?" I whispered. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me with a resounding crash. I jolted upright, my heart leaping into my throat. "Who's there?" No answer. I rushed back to the door, twisting the handle. It opened easily, and I exhaled in relief, stepping back into the store. I nearly collided with Jenna. "Whoa, you scared me," she exclaimed, hand over her chest. "I've been looking for you. Did you shut the warehouse door just now?" I asked. She frowned. "No, I've been on the other side of the store." "Why?" I hesitated, unsure of how to explain. "I thought I heard someone in the warehouse. Maybe Mike is pulling a prank." "Mike's been with Linda up front, counting inventory," Jenna said slowly. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired, I guess." She gave me a concerned look but didn't press further. Together, we returned to the main floor, and I tried to shake off the unease. The rest of the night passed without incident, but a lingering sense of dread hung over me. I wasn't the only one. Carlos mentioned feeling like someone was watching him while he restocked the home goods aisle. "Every time I looked over my shoulder, no one was there," he said, forcing a laugh. "Maybe this place is haunted." "By who?" "The ghost of rollback prices," Mike joked, but his eyes betrayed his discomfort. By the time our shift ended at 7 a.m., we were all eager to leave. As we clocked out, Linda pulled us aside. "Did any of you notice anything strange last night?" she asked, her tone cautious. We exchanged glances. "Like what?" Jenna ventured. Linda sighed. "Probably nothing, just some odd noises. Things not being where they should be. Could be the holiday stress getting to me." I wanted to mention the shoe and the scratches but decided against it. Maybe we were all just tired. I went home and collapsed into bed, but sleep was fitful. My dreams were filled with echoes of that eerie laughter and the image of the old shoe lying in the dark. When I returned to work the next night, the atmosphere had shifted. The usual camaraderie was replaced with tension. Linda greeted us with a forced smile. "Let's try to get everything done quickly tonight," she said. "I think we could all use some rest." We nodded in agreement. Around midnight, the power flickered. The overhead lights dimmed for a moment before returning to full brightness. "That's weird," Carlos remarked. "It's not even storming." "Probably a glitch," Mike said, but he didn't sound convinced. As we resumed our tasks, that laugh echoed through the store once more. This time, we all heard it. "Okay, seriously, who's doing that?" Jenna demanded, her voice shaking. "It's not funny anymore," Carlos added. We gathered near the electronics section, where the sound seemed loudest. "Maybe it's a customer," Mike suggested, though we all knew the store was empty. Linda joined us, her face pale. "Stay together," she instructed. "We'll check it out as a group." We moved cautiously toward the source of the laughter, which led us back to the warehouse. The doors were open, darkness spilling out like ink. "I don't like this," Jenna whispered. "Neither do I admitted. Linda took a deep breath. "We have to make sure everything's okay. Follow me." We entered the warehouse, our footsteps echoing. The air was frigid, our breaths visible in thin clouds. Suddenly, the lights above us blinked out, plunging us into darkness. "Stay calm," Linda's voice called out. "Does anyone have a flashlight?" I pulled out my phone, activating the flashlight app. The beam illuminated the faces of my coworkers, all wide-eyed and tense. Then, from somewhere ahead, the laughter erupted louder, more maniacal. It bounced off the walls, surrounding us. "Run!" Carlos shouted. We didn't need to be told twice. We sprinted back toward the store entrance, but the path seemed longer, the aisles stretching endlessly. "Over here," Mike yelled, pointing to a side door. We burst through it, finding ourselves in a small break room. The laughter had stopped, but the silence was just as unsettling. "What the hell is happening?" Jenna gasped, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know," Linda replied, her composure cracking. "But we're leaving. Now." We exited the store through the emergency exit, the alarm blaring behind us. Outside, the night air was a welcome relief, despite the lingering fear. The next day, corporate sent an email stating that the store would be closed for an investigation due to unforeseen circumstances. We were given the week off with pay. Rumors spread quickly among the staff. Some said the store was built on old burial grounds. Others claimed it was haunted by the ghost of a former employee. None of us knew what to believe. I tried to put the experience behind me, but sleep offered no respite. Nightmares plagued me. Visions of shadowy figures lurking in the aisles, cold hands reaching out from the darkness. A few days later, Linda called. "Hey," she began hesitantly. "I wanted to check in. How are you holding up?" "I'm managing," I replied. "You?" "Same. Listen, I did some digging about the store's history. My interest piqued." "What did you find?" "Apparently, during the store's construction, a worker went missing. They never found him. Some say he fell into the foundation. Others think he just skipped town." "Why wasn't this ever mentioned?" "It's not exactly something they advertise," she said wryly. "But I can't shake the feeling that what we experienced is connected." I thought back to the old shoe and the scratches. "I found a shoe in the warehouse that night," I confessed, "and there were deep scratches on the floor. Why didn't you say anything?" "I didn't want to sound crazy." She sighed. "You're not crazy. Something is wrong with that place." "Are you going back?" I asked. There was a long pause. "I don't think so." I handed in my resignation. "Maybe that's for the best. Take care of yourself," she said softly before hanging up. I never returned to that Walmart. From what I heard, several other employees quit, and the store struggled to maintain staff. Eventually, it closed down permanently. Months later, curiosity got the better of me. I drove by the abandoned building. The parking lot was overgrown with weeds, windows boarded up. As I sat there, memories flooded back, the laughter, the fear, the sense of being watched. I decided to walk around the perimeter, hoping for closure. Near the back of the building, I spotted a gap in the plywood covering a broken window. Against my better judgment, I peered inside. The interior was a cavern of shadows, but in the faint light, I saw the warehouse doors wide open. And then, faint but unmistakable, I heard it, the raspy chuckle echoing from within. A shiver coursed through me. As I turned to leave, my foot struck something on the ground. Looking down, I saw it, the same old, tattered shoe. I didn't wait. I ran back to my car and drove away, the laughter ringing in my ears. To this day, I don't know what we encountered in that store. Some things defy explanation, existing in the spaces between reality and nightmare. I share this story as a warning. Sometimes, the past clings to places, seeping into the present in ways we can't understand. And when you feel that chill, that sense of unseen eyes upon you, trust your instincts, because in the shadows, something may be watching, waiting, and it might just be laughing. Story number 2. I never thought that working the late shift at a Walmart in Ohio could be anything more than mundane. Stocking shelves, helping last-minute shoppers, and dealing with the occasional spill were all part of the routine. But that Black Friday in 2014 changed everything I understood about the world, or at least, about that store. It was the evening after Thanksgiving, and the store was a madhouse. Customers swarmed in like locusts, eyes glazed with the hunger of a good deal. TVs flew off the shelves, toys vanished in minutes, and the electronics section was a war zone. I was stationed near the front, tasked with managing the flow of shopping carts and ensuring there were enough for the incoming waves. By midnight, the initial rush had tapered off. The store was still busy, but the frantic energy had dulled to a steady buzz. I took a moment to catch my breath near the entrance when I noticed a lone shopping cart rolling slowly down aisle 5. "That's odd," I muttered. The floors were flat. I'd walked them hundreds of times, so there was no incline to account for the movement. I glanced around, expecting to see someone retrieving the cart. But the aisle was empty, shaking off a creeping sense of unease. I walked over to grab it. As I approached, the cart veered sharply to the right, entering the home goods section. "Hey, stop messing around," I called out, thinking a coworker was playing a prank. No response. I followed the cart as it weaved through displays of pillows and bedding. It wasn't moving fast, but with enough purpose that I had to quicken my pace. Just as I was about to reach it, the cart stopped abruptly. I grabbed the handle, feeling a slight resistance before it settled into place. "Must be a glitch in the floor," I reasoned, though doubt gnawed at me. Returning the cart to the front, I brushed off the incident and dived back into work. The rest of the night was uneventful until around 3 a.m., when the store was nearly empty except for a few die-hard shoppers. I was restocking shelves in the cereal aisle when, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it again, the same cart, or one just like it, rolling slowly down the aisle toward me. "Very funny, guys," I shouted, suspecting my coworkers were trying to spook me. Silence. I walked toward the cart, my footsteps echoing in the quiet aisle. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly overhead. This time, as I neared, the cart didn't swerve away. Instead, it came to a gentle stop right in front of me. I peered around the corner, expecting to catch someone hiding, but the aisle was empty. A chill ran down my spine. "Hello," I called out. No answer. I inspected the cart, half expecting to find a remote control device or some rigged mechanism. But it was just a standard, slightly battered Walmart cart. I decided to push it back to the cart corral myself. As I walked, the store's quietness settled in, a stark contrast to the earlier chaos. The music playing softly over the speakers did little to alleviate the eerie atmosphere. Passing by electronics, I saw my coworker, Lisa, organizing video games. "Hey, were you messing with a cart earlier?" I asked. She looked up, puzzled. "No, I've been stuck here all night." "Why?" I hesitated. "It's nothing. Just thought someone was trying to prank me." She gave a tired smile. "Not tonight. I'm too beat for jokes." I nodded and continued on. Maybe I was just overworked. An hour later, I was in the back room checking inventory when the security guard, Tom, approached me. "Hey, can you come take a look at something?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "Sure. What's up?" "There's something on the cameras I think you should see." In the security office, Tom replayed footage from earlier in the night. On the screen, the shopping cart moved down aisle 5 on its own. There were no strings, no remote controls, nothing that explained its movement. "See that?" Tom pointed. "It changes direction without anyone touching it." I watched, a knot forming in my stomach. The cart's movements were deliberate, almost purposeful. It didn't just roll in a straight line. It weaved through aisles, turned corners, and even stopped momentarily before continuing. "That's weird," I admitted. "I saw it earlier and thought someone was messing with me." Tom shook his head. "I've been monitoring the cameras all night. No one was near that cart." We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the hum of the monitors. "Maybe there's a logical explanation," I offered weakly. "Air currents? Uneven floors?" Tom gave me a skeptical look. "In all my years here, I've never seen anything like this." Feeling unsettled, I left the security office and decided to take a short break outside. The cold night air was a welcome relief, clearing my head. As I stood by the employee entrance, smoking a cigarette, Lisa joined me. "You okay?" she asked. I exhaled a plume of smoke. "Just a strange night." She nodded. "Tell me about it." Tom showed me that footage. "It's creepy." I looked at her sharply. "You saw it too?" "Yeah. Do you think the place is haunted or something?" I laughed nervously. "Haunted Walmart. That's a new one." She didn't smile. "You haven't heard the stories?" What stories? About this place being built over old farmland? Supposedly, there was a family that lived here in the early 1900s. Tragic stuff, lost their land during the Depression. And some say the father went mad. I scoffed. Sounds like an urban legend. Maybe, she conceded. But sometimes, late at night, I feel like I'm being watched. I shrugged it off, but her words lingered. Returning inside, the atmosphere felt heavier. The store was set to close for a few hours before reopening at dawn. Most of the staff had left, leaving only a skeleton crew to tidy up. I was assigned to clean up the toy section, which looked like a tornado had hit it. As I sorted through the disarray, I heard the faint sound of wheels squeaking. My pulse quickened. Peering around the corner, I saw the same shopping cart at the end of the aisle. Facing me, this was getting ridiculous. All right, this isn't funny anymore, I shouted. The cart jerked forward, rolling slowly toward me. I stepped back instinctively. Who's there? No answer. The cart picked up speed. I turned and ran, my heart pounding, darting through the maze of aisles. I could hear the cart's wheels clattering behind me. Faster now. I glanced back and saw it careening around a corner, nearly tipping over. This couldn't be happening. I sprinted toward the front of the store, where Tom should still be in the security office. Bursting in, I found the room empty. The monitors flickered, static distorting the images. Tom, I called out. A faint whisper crackled through the radio on the desk. You shouldn't have seen. What? I picked up the radio. Tom, is that you? Silence. The lights in the room flickered, then went out entirely, plunging me into darkness. The only illumination came from the dim glow of the monitors. I heard the wheels before I saw it. The cart was approaching the office, the sound echoing in the empty store, backing against the wall. I searched frantically for something to defend myself with. My hands found a heavy flashlight. The cart rolled into view at the doorway, stopping as if considering its next move. Then, slowly, turned to face me. This is insane, I whispered, gathering my courage. I stepped forward and swung the flashlight at the cart, connected with a loud clang, knocking the cart onto its side. I waited, breathless. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the cart began to right itself, wheels spinning in the air before it flipped back onto all four wheels. A cold breeze swept through the room, carrying with it a faint scent of smoke. Get out, a raspy voice whispered. I froze. Who's there? Leave, now. I didn't need to be told again. I bolted from the security office, heading for the nearest exit. The automatic doors didn't open as I approached. Come on, I yelled, pounding on the glass. Behind me, the cart was rolling closer, the metal rattling loudly. Desperate, I smashed the emergency exit button. The doors hissed open, and I stumbled out into the night. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. Fumbling with the keys, I started the engine and tore out of the parking lot. I didn't return to work after that night. When management called, I made up an excuse about a family emergency and quit. A week later, I met up with Lisa at a coffee shop. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes. You felt it too, didn't you? She asked quietly. I nodded. What happened after I left? She sipped her coffee, hands trembling slightly. The store was closed for a few days. Rumors circulated that there was an electrical issue, but I heard from Tom that they reviewed the security footage. And she leaned in. The cameras caught everything. The cart moving on its own, following you. But here's the thing, they also saw something else. My mouth went dry. What do you mean? Shadows, figures appearing and disappearing. At one point, they saw what looked like a man standing in the toy aisle. But when they zoomed in, his face was distorted. A chill ran through me. They tried to keep it quiet, but word got out. Some employees refused to go back. Management is considering shutting the store down. I sat back, trying to process everything. Do you think it's related to that family you mentioned? She shrugged. I don't know, but something is wrong with that place. We sat in silence, the weight of the experience hanging between us. Maybe it's best to move on, I suggested. Forget it ever happened. She gave a sad smile. Easier said than done. As I left the coffee shop, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every squeak of a shopping cart, every flicker of fluorescent light in stores brought back memories of that night. Months later, I heard that the Walmart had been closed indefinitely. Some said it was due to structural issues. Others whispered about hauntings and unexplained accidents. I don't know what truly happened in that store, or why a seemingly ordinary shopping cart became the vessel for something sinister. But I do know that some places hold onto echoes of the past, tragedies, anger, restless spirits. So if you ever find yourself alone in a store late at night and see a cart moving on its own, think twice before you follow it. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. Story number 3. I never expected that taking a seasonal job at a Walmart in Florida would lead me into a nightmare that still haunts me to this day. It was Black Friday in 2016, and like many others trying to make some extra cash for the holidays, I signed up for the chaos that comes with the biggest shopping day of the year. The store was a sprawling labyrinth of aisles packed with discounted goods, and the atmosphere buzzed with a mix of excitement and desperation. Shoppers lined up outside hours before opening, their silhouettes pressed against the glass doors like restless spirits eager to break free. My shift started at midnight. As a floor associate, my job was to manage crowd control in the electronics section, always the most volatile area. The doors opened, and a tidal wave of humanity flooded in. People scrambled for TVs, laptops, anything with a slashed price tag. Shouts and scuffles broke out sporadically, but overall, it was the usual Black Friday madness. Around 2 a.m., things began to quiet down. The initial surge subsided, leaving the store in a disheveled state. I was restocking shelves when I noticed him for the first time. He stood at the far corner of the store, near the garden section that had been cleared out for winter merchandise. Dressed in outdated clothes, a faded flannel shirt, worn jeans, and scuffed work boots, he seemed out of place among the throngs of shoppers clad in modern attire. His face was indistinct, as if blurred around the edges, making it hard to focus on his features. I watched as he stood utterly still, hands by his sides, staring straight ahead. First, I thought he might be a lost customer or perhaps someone in need of assistance. "Hey there, can I help you find something?" I called out, making my way toward him. He didn't respond, didn't even glance in my direction. As I approached, a cold draft swept through the aisle, raising goosebumps on my arms. The air felt heavy, tinged with the scent of damp earth and something metallic. I stopped in my tracks, a sudden unease washing over me. "Sir," I tried again. Still nothing. Just then, a coworker, Maria, tapped me on the shoulder. I nearly jumped out of my skin. "Didn't mean to scare you." She laughed softly. "Management needs you at the front." I glanced back toward the corner, but the man was gone. "Did you see where that guy went?" I asked. Maria frowned. "What guy?" "The man who was just standing over there," I said, pointing. "In old clothes, kind of faded looking." She shook her head. "I didn't see anyone." Shrugging it off, I followed her to the front of the store. The rest of the night was uneventful, but I couldn't shake the image of the man. Something about him bothered me. The stillness, the way the air changed around him. A few nights later, I was on the overnight shift again. Around 3 a.m., the store was virtually empty except for a few insomniac shoppers and the skeleton crew of employees. I was organizing a display when I saw him again. This time, he was near the hardware section, standing in the same unnerving stillness. His face was still a blur, impossible to focus on no matter how hard I tried. A chill crept down my spine. I decided to notify security. "Hey, Tom," I said, approaching the security desk. "There's a guy in the hardware section who seems off. Could you check it out?" Tom glanced at the monitors. "Where exactly?" I pointed to the screen displaying the hardware aisle. The man was clearly visible, standing motionless. "That's creepy," Tom muttered. "All right, I'll go have a look." I watched as Tom made his way through the aisles on the monitor. He approached the spot where the man stood, but as he turned the corner, he stopped abruptly. Through the camera, I could see that the aisle was empty. The man was gone. Tom radioed back. "There's no one here." I stared at the screen, confused. He was just there a second ago. Tom searched the surrounding aisles but found no one. He returned to the security desk with a puzzled expression. "Maybe he left," he suggested, but something didn't add up. Over the next few weeks, sightings of the man became more frequent among the night staff. Maria mentioned feeling like someone was watching her when she was alone in an aisle. Others spoke of cold spots and unexplained noises, footsteps, faint whispers, the sound of something heavy dragging along the floor. One night, I was in the break room when I overheard a conversation between two longtime employees. "He's back," one of them whispered. "Who?" the other asked. "The man in the old clothes. I saw him near the loading dock." "Don't start with that again. You know management doesn't like those stories." Curiosity piqued. I joined the conversation. "Who is he?" I asked. They exchanged glances before one of them sighed. "Back in 2006, there was an accident during Black Friday," he began. "The store was overcrowded, and in the rush, a man was trampled to death near the entrance. They say he was wearing old clothes, like from another time. Some think he was homeless. Others say he was just down on his luck." "Why haven't I heard about this?" I asked, unsettled. Management hushed it up, didn't want bad press, but ever since then, people have reported seeing him always during the holidays, always at night. A knot formed in my stomach. That night, I decided to do some research, scouring old newspaper archives and online forums. I found a small article about a fatal incident at the store on Black Friday in 2006. The victim was never identified. Witnesses described him as a middle-aged man in outdated clothing. A grainy security photo accompanied the article. Even with the poor quality, I recognized the man I'd seen. The next shift, I approached Tom in security. "Can you pull up the footage from the last few nights?" I asked. "I want to see something." He agreed, and we sifted through hours of recordings. Sure enough, there he was, standing motionless in various parts of the store. But whenever a security guard or employee approached, he'd vanish without a trace. Tom leaned back in his chair, a troubled expression on his face. "This is impossible," he said. "There's no way someone could move that quickly without being seen." We decided to bring it to the store manager, Mr. Phillips. After showing him the footage, he rubbed his temples and sighed heavily. "I was hoping this wouldn't start up again," he muttered. "You knew about this?" I pressed. He nodded reluctantly. "We've had incidents over the years, unexplained sightings, reports of a man in old clothes. Corporate doesn't want us discussing it. Bad for business." "With all due respect, sir, there's something seriously wrong here," Tom said. "We need to figure out what's going on." Mr. Phillips stood up. "I'll notify upper management. In the meantime, I expect you all to keep this to yourselves." "Understood." Frustrated, we left his office. It was clear that management wasn't going to help. That night, couldn't sleep. Images of the man haunted me. I felt a strange mix of fear and empathy. Who was he? What did he want? I decided to try something different. The following night, during a quiet moment, I went to the spot where I'd first seen him, the garden section. "Hello," I called out softly. "I don't mean any harm. I just want to understand." Silence. I waited, feeling a bit foolish. Just as I was about to leave, a cold breeze swept through, chilling me to the bone. I turned, and there he was, standing a few feet away. Up close, his face was still a blur, but his eyes were sharp and filled with sorrow. "What do you want?" I whispered. He raised a hand and pointed toward the front of the store. "Escape," A voice echoed in my mind, though his lips didn't move. Escape from what? I asked aloud, but he faded away like mist, leaving me alone in the dimly lit aisle. I felt a sudden urge to dig deeper. Over the next few days, I gathered what little information I could find. Some older employees hinted at cover-ups, mentioning that the man had been trapped in the store during the rush, unable to get out due to the sheer number of people pushing their way in. An idea began to form. Perhaps he was stuck, caught between worlds, reliving the moment of his death, unable to move on. I decided to help. I approached Maria and Tom, sharing my theory. They were skeptical but agreed to assist. We planned a small vigil for him after hours, gathering at the entrance where the incident had occurred. We lit a candle and stood in a circle. "We're here to acknowledge you," I began. "We're sorry for what happened. You didn't deserve to be forgotten." Maria added softly, "We hope you find peace." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a gentle warmth enveloped us, and the candle flame flickered brightly before extinguishing on its own. I think it worked," Tom said, his eyes wide. In the weeks that followed, the sightings stopped. The store felt lighter, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. I thought that was the end of it. But on Christmas Eve, as the store was closing early, I lingered near the entrance, watching the last customers leave. A familiar chill brushed past me. Turning slowly, I saw him one last time. He stood outside the glass doors, a faint smile on his now clear face. He raised a hand in a gesture of thanks before fading into the night. I never saw him again after that. I left Walmart the following year, moving on to a different job. But every Black Friday, I remember the man in old clothes, the restless spirit caught in a place of tragedy. I often wonder how many others are out there, souls tethered to moments of pain or injustice, waiting for someone to notice them. And I think about how important it is to acknowledge the unseen, to offer compassion even when we don't fully understand. Because sometimes, the past lingers, and all it takes to set it free is a little kindness. So if you ever feel a chill in the air or catch a glimpse of someone who doesn't quite belong, maybe pause for a moment. You never know who might be reaching out, longing to be remembered. Story number 4. I never imagined that a simple shopping trip could turn into a nightmare that would haunt me forever. It was Black Friday, 2015. And like many others in Houston, Texas, I was lured by the siren call of discounted goods and the thrill of the hunt. The Walmart near my apartment was a hive of activity, buzzing with the frenetic energy of shoppers eager to snag the best deals. I arrived at the store just after dawn, the sky still a murky gray. The parking lot was already packed, a sea of vehicles gleaming under the fluorescent lights. I took a deep breath and steeled myself for the chaos inside. As I navigated through the crowded aisles, I felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The store was a cacophony of sounds: shopping carts squeaking, children whining, announcements blaring over the PA system. I was searching for a new winter coat, something stylish yet affordable. After sifting through racks of clothing, I found a sleek black trench that seemed perfect. I headed toward the fitting rooms at the back of the store. The area was surprisingly quiet, a small oasis away from the tumult. A sign indicated that an attendant would be present, but the desk was unattended. Shrugging it off, I pushed open the door to the women's fitting rooms. The corridor was lined with stalls on either side. Each door closed. Soft overhead lighting cast a warm glow, and the muffled sounds of the store faded into the background. I tried the first door, it was locked. So was the second. Finally, the third door creaked open. The room was small but clean. A simple bench against one wall and a mirror hanging opposite. I closed the door behind me and began to try on the coat. As I turned to face the mirror, a sudden chill ran down my spine. The temperature seemed to drop, and I could see my breath clouding in the air. "That's odd," I muttered, rubbing my hands together. The fluorescent light flickered overhead. I glanced up, and when I looked back at the mirror, for a split second, I thought I saw a shadow move behind me. I spun around, but the tiny room was empty. Get a grip, I told myself, laughing nervously. I turned back to the mirror and continued adjusting the coat. Fit perfectly, hugging my frame just right. But as I admired the garment, the light flickered again, and the reflection in the mirror warped. My face seemed distorted, eyes darker, mouth twisted into a grimace. I blinked hard, and the image returned to normal. Maybe I didn't get enough sleep, I thought. Deciding I'd had enough, I changed back into my clothes. As I reached for the door handle, it wouldn't turn. I jiggled it, but it was stuck. Seriously, I muttered. I knocked on the door. Hello? Is anyone out there? The door's jammed. Silence, pressing my ear against the door. I listened for any signs of movement. The air was thick with an unsettling quiet. No footsteps, no distant chatter, nothing. A sense of unease began to creep in. I pulled out my phone to call for help, but there was no signal. Of course, I sighed, taking a deep breath. I pounded on the door harder. Hello? I need some assistance. I'm trapped in here. The light above me buzzed and dimmed, casting the room in shadows. Panic started to bubble up. I banged on the door with both fists. Please, can anyone hear me? Suddenly, a faint whisper echoed in the small space. You're not alone. I froze. The voice was barely audible, like a breath against my ear. Who's there? I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. No response. My heart was racing now. I scanned the room, looking for any other exit, a vent, panel, anything. The walls seemed to close in, the air growing colder by the second. Then, the mirror caught my eye. The surface was rippling, like water disturbed by a pebble. I stepped closer, reaching out tentatively. My fingertips brushed against it, and the glass felt oddly warm, pulsing under my touch. Without warning, a hand shot out from the mirror, grabbing my wrist with an icy grip. I screamed, trying to pull away, but the hand held tight. It was pale, almost translucent, with long, slender fingers that dug into my skin. Let me go, I shrieked, terror flooding my veins. A face emerged from the mirror, a woman's face, eyes hollow and mouth stretched into a sinister smile. Her features were blurred, as if submerged underwater. Stay with me, she whispered, her voice echoing inside my head. Using all my strength, I yanked my arm back, breaking free from her grasp. I stumbled backward, crashing into the door. Pain shot through my shoulder, but adrenaline pushed it aside. The mirror began to crack, fractures spiderwebbing across its surface. The woman's face distorted, splitting along the jagged lines. Desperate, I threw myself against the door again and again. On the third hit, it burst open, and I fell into the corridor outside, gasping for breath. I looked around. The fitting room hallway was abandoned, the other doors ajar. The overhead lights flickered ominously. I scrambled to my feet and ran toward the exit. As I reached the main floor of the store, the noise of shoppers and holiday music hit me like a wave. The stark contrast was jarring. I spotted a store associate arranging clothes nearby. "Excuse me," I called out, my voice shaky. She turned to me with a polite smile that faded when she saw my face. "Ma'am, are you all right? There's someone in the fitting room. A woman. She tried to grab me through the mirror." Her brow furrowed. "I'm sorry. What? Please, you have to believe me." She glanced around uncertainly. "Let me get a manager." Moments later, she returned with a middle-aged man wearing a name tag that read, "Steve Manager." "What's the problem?" he asked, his tone measured. I recounted the events, my words tumbling out in a frantic rush. Steve listened, his expression skeptical but concerned. "All right," he said after I finished. "Let's go take a look." We headed back to the fitting rooms, the associate trailing behind us. The corridor was brightly lit now, the atmosphere seemingly normal. I led them to the stall I'd been in. The door was closed, but it was open. I stammered. Steve tried the handle. "It's locked." He knocked, Anyone in there? No answer. He pulled out a set of keys and unlocked the door. The room was empty. The mirror was intact. No cracks or signs of damage. But it was broken. There was a woman. She came through the mirror. Steve exchanged a glance with the associate. Maybe you were feeling unwell, he suggested gently. These sales can be overwhelming. I felt a flush of frustration and embarrassment. I'm not making this up. He sighed. Tell you what, why don't we check the security footage? Maybe that'll clear things up. I agreed, clinging to the hope that the cameras had captured what happened. In the security office, we huddled around a monitor as a guard pulled up the footage. The screen showed a grainy black and white view of the fitting room entrance. There's you entering, Steve pointed out as I appeared on the screen. We watched as I walked down the corridor and entered the third stall. Now, let's fast forward. The video sped up, minutes ticking by, but I never came out. Wait, where am I? I asked, bewildered. The guard rewound and played it again. Same result. I entered but didn't exit. That doesn't make sense, Steve muttered. Check the other cameras. They cycled through various angles, but there was no sign of me leaving the fitting rooms. Maybe the cameras malfunctioned, the guard suggested. I shook my head. I walked right out into the store. People saw me. Steve rubbed his temples. Look, maybe you should sit down for a bit. Can I get you some water? Anger and fear churned inside me. You're not listening. Something is wrong. At that moment, the associate who had accompanied us earlier burst into the room, her face pale. Steve, you need to see this. We followed her back to the fitting rooms. A small crowd of employees had gathered outside the stall I'd used. What's going on? Steve demanded. One of them pointed at the door. There, smeared across the surface, was a bloody handprint. My stomach lurched. Is that a prank? Steve asked, his voice tight. No one has been back here since we left. The associate replied. He unlocked the door again, and this time, the mirror inside was cracked. A single jagged line running from top to bottom. Call security, Steve ordered. Already did. Someone replied. I stood there, numb, as they cordoned off the area. Questions swirled in my mind. How was this possible? Was I losing my mind? The police arrived shortly after, taking statements and reviewing the footage. They were as baffled as we were. One officer approached me. Ma'am, we need to ask you some questions. I nodded silently. Did you notice anything unusual before entering the fitting room? I hesitated. No. Well, the attendant wasn't there. He jotted something down. And you didn't see anyone else in the area? No. He exchanged a look with his partner. Do you have any injuries? Cuts or anything that could explain the blood? I glanced at my hands. They were clean. No, I don't think so. They took my contact information and advised me to get some rest. As I left the store, I felt the weight of unseen eyes on me. The festive decorations and cheerful music now seemed grotesque, a mockery of the dread settling in my bones. I tried to resume my normal life, but things only grew stranger. My phone would ring with no one on the other end. Reflections in windows and mirrors seemed to lag, not matching my movements. Shadows loomed where they shouldn't. One night, I woke to whispers echoing in my bedroom. You're not alone, the voice from the fitting room murmured. I bolted upright, turning on every light. The room was empty, but the words lingered, chilling me to the core. Desperate for answers, I returned to the Walmart, seeking out Steve. He informed me that the fitting room area was closed indefinitely. Strange things keep happening, he admitted reluctantly. Employees reporting voices, cold spots. Some refused to work that section. Has anyone found out who the woman was? The one in the mirror. He shook his head. There's no record of anyone fitting that description. The police are stumped. I left the store, a sense of hopelessness washing over me. As I walked through the parking lot, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a car window. For a moment, it wasn't my face staring back but hers. the woman from the mirror. Her eyes filled with a sorrow that pierced my soul. I stumbled back, blinking rapidly. My reflection returned to normal. "Why me?" I whispered into the cold night air. No answer came, only the distant sounds of traffic and the rustling of leaves. I began researching the store's history, looking for any incidents that might explain the haunting. Buried in old newspapers and online forums, I found a story from years ago. In the late 1990s, a young woman named Laura had gone missing from that very Walmart on Black Friday, last seen entering the fitting rooms. She never emerged. The case went cold. Her disappearance a lingering mystery. A photo accompanied the article. It was her, the woman from the mirror. My heart pounded as I connected the dots. Was she trapped somehow? Reaching out for help? Determined, I returned to the store one final time. It was late, and the crowds had thinned. I slipped past the barriers into the closed-off fitting room area. The air was thick, each step heavier than the last. I stood before the cracked mirror in the stall where it all began. "Laura," I called out softly. "I'm here. Tell me what you need." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the mirror began to ripple once more. Her face appeared, eyes pleading. "Help me," she whispered. "How?" I asked, tears welling up. "Find me." The reflection faded, and the mirror shattered, shards raining down but miraculously not cutting me. I stumbled out, resolving to bring closure to her story. I contacted the police, sharing my findings and urging them to reopen the case. Skeptical but intrigued, they agreed to investigate. Weeks later, I received a call. They had discovered human remains in a sealed-off maintenance room behind the fitting rooms. Dental records confirmed it was Laura. The news was both horrifying and relieving. Her family finally had answers, and perhaps her spirit could find peace. But for me, the ordeal wasn't over. The disturbances continued, the whispers, the distorted reflections. One night, I found a message scrawled on my bathroom mirror in condensation. "Thank you." I smiled sadly. "You're welcome," I whispered, but as I turned away, the reflection lingered, not matching my movements. "You're not alone." The voice echoed once more, but this time, it wasn't just Laura's. Dozens of faint faces emerged in the mirror, eyes hollow, mouths opening in silent screams. I realized with dawning horror that Laura wasn't the only one trapped, that the fitting room was a gateway, a threshold between worlds where lost souls lingered. And somehow, they had latched onto me. Now, every mirror is a portal, every reflection a reminder that I am never truly alone. I share this story not as a warning, but as a testament. Be cautious of the unseen, the forgotten. Sometimes, the past reaches out in ways we can't comprehend. And if you ever feel a chill when you look into a mirror, or see something out of the corner of your eye that shouldn't be there, perhaps it's best not to linger, because some doors, once opened, can never be closed. Story number 5. I never imagined that a simple part-time job at a toy store could unravel into a nightmare that would haunt me for years. Back in 2008, I was a college student in New York City, juggling classes during the day and working nights at Gleason's Toy Emporium, a historic, family-owned store nestled in the heart of Manhattan. It was the kind of place that exuded nostalgia, with wooden shelves lined with classic toys, the scent of old books mingling with new plastic. The holiday season was our busiest time, and that year, a rare toy had taken the city by storm, the mythical Marvin action figure. It was a limited edition release, and every kid seemed to have it at the top of their Christmas list. Parents flooded the store, desperate to get their hands on one before supplies ran out. Black Friday arrived like a tidal wave. The doors hadn't even fully opened when a surge of customers pushed their way inside. Eyes wild with urgency, I was stationed near the toy in question, tasked with restocking the shelf as quickly as the boxes flew off it. Amid the chaos, I noticed a man tall, disheveled, with a desperation that set him apart from the rest. His eyes darted around, fixating on the dwindling stack of mythical Marvins. as he reached for one. Another shopper, a heavy-set woman with sharp elbows, snatched it from under his grasp. "Hey, I had that first," he protested. "Finders keepers." She shot back, clutching the box to her chest. What happened next unfolded in a blur. The man lunged to reclaim the toy, but the crowd around them surged, and he was shoved backward. His feet tangled, and he fell hard, his head striking the edge of a metal shelf with a sickening thud. Time seemed to freeze. The cacophony of the store dulled to a muffled hum as I stared. Horrified, blood pooled beneath his head, stark against the gleaming white tiles. Someone screamed. Shoppers backed away, a ripple of panic spreading through the crowd. I snapped into action, vaulting over the counter to reach him. "Call 911, I shouted to no one in particular. Kneeling beside him, I checked for a pulse, but there was nothing. His eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, unseeing. As I knelt there, a chill swept over me, a sudden, piercing cold that didn't belong in the overheated frenzy of the store. It raised the hairs on the back of my neck. I glanced around, and that's when I heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible over the din. "No one escapes." I looked at the man again, a creeping dread settling in my stomach. His lips were slightly parted, but he hadn't spoken. Others around us seemed oblivious, their faces masks of shock and confusion. Paramedics arrived swiftly, but it was too late. The man was declared dead on the scene. The store closed early that day, a grim pall hanging over the staff and shoppers alike. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the unease that clung to me. The store reopened, and life seemed to go on. But something had shifted. The air felt heavier, shadows longer. My coworkers whispered about feeling watched when they were alone in the aisles, about toys that weren't where they'd left them. One evening, as the closing shift wrapped up, I was assigned to tidy the toy section, the very spot where the tragedy had occurred. The store was quiet, the last customers long gone. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead as I straightened boxes and picked up stray items. A sudden clatter broke the silence. I spun around to see a mythical Marvin action figure lying in the middle of the aisle, several feet from the shelf where it belonged. "Very funny, guys," I called out, expecting one of my coworkers to emerge with a grin. Silence. I walked over and picked up the toy. As I replaced it on the shelf, that icy chill washed over me again. The temperature seemed to plummet, my breath misting in the air. The overhead lights flickered. That's when I heard the whisper once more, clearer this time. "No one escapes." I felt a prickling sensation, as if unseen eyes were fixed upon me. Heart pounding, I hurried to finish my task. The sense of urgency gnawed at me, an instinctive need to leave. The next night, the feeling intensified. Jenna, a fellow employee, mentioned hearing footsteps when she was alone in the break room. Probably just the building settling, I suggested, but we both knew the store was too new for that. Later, while stocking stuffed animals, I heard soft footsteps behind me. I turned, expecting to see Jenna or Mark, but the aisle was empty. The plush toys stared back with glassy eyes. A display model toppled over, its mechanical voice activating as it hit the floor. "Let's play," it chirped. I jumped, nerves frayed, as I bent to pick it up. A shadow flickered at the edge of my vision. I stood up sharply, scanning the area. "Hello? Is someone there?" Silence answered. I convinced myself it was just my imagination, stress from school and work piling up. But the incidents continued. Toys misplaced, the inexplicable chill, and always that whisper when I was alone. One night, I decided to mention it to Mr. Harris, the store manager. "Have you noticed anything unusual lately?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He gave me a sharp look. "What do you mean?" I hesitated. "Just odd sounds, things not being where they should be." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Look, if this is about what happened last month, I suggest you put it out of your mind. Accidents happen, but others have noticed things too." I pressed. He leaned forward, Listen, it's a busy season. Everyone's tired. Let's not start any rumors that could scare the customers or the staff. Understood. I nodded reluctantly. Understood. Leaving his office, I felt a mix of frustration and isolation. Clearly, this wasn't something management wanted to acknowledge. A week later, the situation escalated. I was closing up with Mark, the two of us the last employees in the store. We split up to finish our tasks more quickly. I was in the toy section, of course, when the lights began to dim intermittently. "Mark," I called out, "are you messing with the lights?" No response. The intercom crackled to life, emitting a low static before a distorted voice whispered, "No one escapes." My blood ran cold. I grabbed my things and headed toward the front of the store. As I passed the checkout lanes, I noticed Mark standing near the entrance, staring out the glass doors into the street. "Mark, did you hear that?" I asked, approaching him. He didn't respond. I touched his shoulder. "Mark." He turned slowly, his face pale and eyes unfocused. "Do you feel that?" he whispered. "Feel what?" "The cold. It's like something's here with us." Before I could reply, a loud crash echoed from the back of the store. We both jumped. "What was that?" I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. "Sounded like it came from the stockroom," Mark said. We exchanged a glance. Neither of us wanted to check it out, but we couldn't just leave it. "Stay here," I told him. "I'll go look." He shook his head. "No way. We go together." We made our way cautiously toward the stockroom, the store eerily silent except for our footsteps. The door was ajar, darkness spilling out like ink. I flicked on the light, and the sight that greeted us made my heart lurch. Boxes were strewn across the floor, their contents spilled. Shelves toppled over, merchandise scattered. In the center of the chaos stood a single mythical Marvin action figure, upright despite the surrounding mess. "How did this happen?" Mark whispered. A gust of frigid air swept past us, and the overhead lights flickered violently before plunging us into darkness. Panic surged. "We need to get out of here," I said urgently. We turned to leave, but the door slammed shut with a force that rattled the walls. "Who's there?" Mark shouted, pounding on the door. That voice returned, echoing around us. "No one escapes." I fumbled for my phone, using its light to navigate. The beam illuminated the path ahead, but shadows danced at the edges, shapes that seemed to move of their own accord. "There's got to be another way out," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We moved deeper into the stockroom, searching for the emergency exit. The temperature continued to drop, our breaths fogging the air. From behind, we heard the soft patter of footsteps, small, like a child's. "Hello," I called out hesitantly. A giggle echoed in response, high-pitched and unnatural. "This isn't funny," Mark yelled, fear cracking his voice. Suddenly, items began to fly off the shelves. Books, toys, boxes hurtling past us or smashing into the walls. We ducked and dodged, adrenaline driving us forward, spotting the glowing red exit sign. We sprinted toward it. As we neared the door, a figure materialized before us, a translucent silhouette of the man who had died. His eyes were hollow, his expression twisted with anguish. "You can't leave," he rasped. "No one escapes." We skidded to a halt, terror rooting us in place. "Please," I begged. "What do you want?" He reached out a hand, and I felt an icy grip close around my wrist. Pain shot up my arm, numbing and burning all at once. "Let him go," Mark shouted, swinging his arm as if to strike the apparition. His hand passed through it, but the distraction was enough. The grip loosened, and I stumbled back. "Go!" I screamed. We barreled through the exit door, bursting into the alley behind the store. The cold night air was a shock, but a welcome one. We didn't stop running until we reached the street, collapsing onto the sidewalk. Breathless, we looked back. The store loomed silently, its windows dark. "What the hell was that?" Mark gasped. I shook my head, still reeling. "I don't know, but it's connected to that man. Over the next few days, we tried to make sense of it. Researching the store's history, we found nothing unusual, no tragic past, no tales of hauntings. It seemed the incident had awakened something, a restless spirit bound by unresolved anger. We approached Mr. Harris again, sharing our experience. This time, he couldn't dismiss us. Other employees had reported strange occurrences. Voices, cold spots, objects moving on their own. Reluctantly, he agreed to bring in a paranormal investigator, a stoic woman named Dr. Elizabeth Shaw. She spent several nights in the store, equipped with an array of devices. Her conclusion was unsettling. "There's a presence here," she stated matter-of-factly. "A male entity, trapped between worlds. He's angry, feeling cheated." "Cheated of what?" I asked. "Life," she replied. "His sudden death left him tethered here, his spirit unable to move on." "Is there anything we can do?" Mark inquired. She considered. "Sometimes, acknowledgement helps. A memorial, perhaps, a gesture to honor his memory." We organized a small ceremony, placing flowers and a framed photo, one taken from the security footage, at the spot where he died. Employees gathered, offering silent prayers. For a while, the store felt lighter, the incidents ceased, and normalcy seemed within reach. But it didn't last. One night, as I was leaving, I heard it again, the whisper, "No one escapes." I turned to see the man's reflection in the glass doors. His eyes meeting mine, despair washed over me. The acknowledgement hadn't been enough. His pain ran deeper. I delved into his background, scouring obituaries and news articles until I found his name. Richard Palmer. He'd been a father of two, recently unemployed, struggling to provide for his family. Guilt gnawed at me, while we'd all been caught up in the frenzy of consumerism. He'd been fighting for a piece of normalcy for his kids. I reached out to his family, expressing my condolences and sharing what I'd experienced. His widow, Maria, was gracious despite her grief. "He just wanted to make the kids happy," she said softly. "He felt like a failure." I explained our encounters, treading carefully. To my surprise, she didn't dismiss me. "Richard was always sensitive," she said. "He believed in unfinished business. Maybe he needs to know that you're okay," I suggested. She agreed to visit the store with me. After hours, we walked through the aisles, her presence a balm to the oppressive atmosphere. At the toy section, she paused, tears welling in her eyes. "Richard, if you're here, please listen," she began. "We miss you, but we're okay. You don't have to stay. Please, find peace." The air around us seemed to still. A soft warmth replaced the lingering cold. I thought I heard a sigh, a whisper carried away on an unseen breeze. In the weeks that followed, the disturbances ceased entirely. The store returned to its usual rhythm, the holiday rush fading into the new year. But I was changed. The experience left an indelible mark, a reminder of the unseen threads that bind us. I often think of Richard, hoping he found the peace he deserved. And every year, when the holiday season rolls around, I say a silent prayer for those overwhelmed by life's hardships. Because sometimes, the ghosts that haunt us are born of our own actions or inactions. And perhaps, acknowledging that is the first step toward healing. Thank you for joining us on this eerie journey through Walmart's mysterious Black Friday events. Whether you believe in ghosts, the unexplained, or just the chaos of the season, these stories remind us that some deals might come with a cost far greater than money. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And as always, stay curious, stay safe, and keep exploring the unknown. Until next time, good night.